Welcome one and all to the Pause Rewind Play podcast. We're glad to have you back. Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come back. It was great.
Well, I was held hostage and told that you had to come back or else I would lose another arm. So here we are. You don't know how to respond to that.
I don't know what joke is appropriate for this.
It's okay. I made the first joke, so you can make a secondary one if you'd like.
Give me a minute.
We're all glad to be back. We'll give you a second to come up with that, but we're all here. The whole cast is here and available. We got Josh. How's it going, man?
It's going quite excellent, Casey. Thank you.
I heard it was a hat day today.
It was a hat day. It was just I was already running a little bit late to come grab you and drive up here. And I looked in the mirror and I probably could have fixed my hair, but then I would have been even more late. So.
And then you got here and I was running late, so it would have worked out just fine.
Hey man, I always like wearing a good hat. It's nice.
You pull off a hat. You have a head for a hat. I have a monstrosity of a head, so like I put on like a regular size hat, and like the bill is like very small. So do you remember those goofy hats? Sorry, we're talking Disney a little bit here today. Remember those goofy hats from that had the really narrow thing
And like the ears.
Yeah, that's how my head looks in all hats. So like it's just kind of like, oh man. So I have to buy those XL type hats because they're just big.
This is why you should just stick with those like shipyard beanies that you wear.
Oh yeah, I love.
They do look good.
Hi Vince, how are you though?
I'm good. Sorry, I keep talking. I should wait till you introduce me.
No, you should talk. You should talk.
I just get so hopped up on caffeine before these shows. I'm just like, I have to talk, guys. I have to talk.
Well, Tyler, what's new in your world of TV watching, movie doing, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I've just actually caught up with Succession season 4. I think is what we're on now. I've actually really enjoyed it. I've started like for season 1 probably like a year or two ago and just couldn't really get into it. And then as like this is like the final season, I finally started watching it more and more. And like I pretty much became like pretty addicted to it, especially after like season 2 was really good, and then season 3 rolling into season 4. Like I've been really enjoying it.
I've heard nothing but good things about it. I still haven't watched it yet, but it's definitely been up there on the list that I've wanted to watch. So
I think you'll love it.
I'm excited.
Alley.
What's this Succession about? Like I'm completely in the dark, but I've seen commercials. So it's kind of like when I see commercials for Empire, though. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but this sounds interesting. So if you could describe Succession really quickly, what would your description of it be? Anyone?
Business. It's like that Muppet that
it's the American way.
Business. That was what I thought when you said that.
I've heard it compared to like an Arrested Development type thing, but not as like comedic, if that makes sense. Okay. Like
because like a super rich family, right?
Yeah, super rich family empire. That's like it's kind of interesting because like the more seasons go on, you're like realize like how big they're. I think it's like based on the guy who owns Fox News or like Rupert Murdoch or whatever, like that family that's like they own like amusement parks and like
just a ton
movie
of stuff.
Studios and a news station that's kind of like Fox News basically. And so it's all about like who's going to kind of take over when the father is getting old and all that stuff. And so it's like very much like that. But then everybody in the family is like super dysfunctional. The thing that I like about it is like there are certain points where you're like, man, I don't know if I can watch this show because it's a little bit. Some of the people are very unlikable. Well, I don't know. I think everybody's
They're
kind
unlikable, but in a likable way.
Yes.
Like
it sounds very Arrested Development.
It's kind of like It's Always Funny. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia too, where like these are terrible people. I want to watch them.
Yes, exactly.
That's how I felt about Mad Men in so many ways too. So, and I love Mad Men.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. So, go watch it if you haven't seen it, guys. I'm gonna go add to my list. Josh, add to your list too. Beep. Perfect. Okay, Vince, what have you been watching, man?
Star Wars Visions 2 came out. Mm-hmm. And the first 3 episodes specifically are just one banger after the next. Those 3 specifically are so good. All of them have been good though. I'm not really into anime, but that's kind of the fun thing about this one is everyone is like a different art style. So there's even like a Wallace and Gromit style one that's pretty good. I have one left on the list, but those first 3 episodes, I'm like over here like these are must-watch Star Wars stuff. None of them are canon. It's all just pure creativity,
their own version, basically. Yeah, like their own. Like if like I don't know. I've only watched like 3, but there was like one that was kind of like a Celtic type thing. It was like, what if they're like someone in like Celtic culture or something made a Star Wars like 20 minutes short or something.
Yeah, all of them about 20 minutes long, and they're so good. There's like a stop animation one. Is that what you call it?
Yeah,
Stop motion.
Stop motion one.
That one was cool.
I loved it with the two sisters.
I also like that first one. That first one with the. I don't even know what kind of animation it is.
Me
it's like
neither.
Color, like watercolors and stuff as the characters moving. Like it's really cool.
So it's so creative.
Back in the day, they made a little Halo mini film like that with the watercolor type thing.
Oh, cool.
It was really cool.
Never saw it.
Oh, I've never heard of this series that you're talking about though. I feel like I live in a hole. I'm like, oh, what's that today? But
I also need to shout out Fleischman is in Trouble. I don't think I ever brought it up on the podcast before. Absolutely loved it. It's about a guy going through divorce. I dropped in thinking I'd watch it like on my lunch breaks, and just it did the same thing that White Lotus did to me, where I was just like, nope, got to sit down for this one because it's that good. It just sucks me right in. Anyway, that's about it. That's a bunch of stuff I've been watching. What have you been watching?
Oh, sounds good. Me?
Yes, sir.
Well, I've been going through and revisiting all the Marvel films in the cinematic universe with my wife, which has been a lot of fun. We just finished Black Panther. We rewatched Captain Marvel, and that was a lot of fun. I caught some things I didn't catch before, which was really interesting in Captain Marvel. And then we've been watching Ted Lasso, and obviously tonight, when we're recording this, is Ted Lasso night, and Ted Lasso has been a whirlwind of emotion for us this year. This season, I guess, has been amazing. I also have started watching Vikings. I believe it's Valhalla, the new one on Netflix. We got Netflix again just for a couple of shows for a month, and I was like, I want to watch Vikings Valhalla because I was really interested in the original Viking series, like one of my faves for a while.
Yeah, me too. Ragnar.
And it's okay. It's not as good in my opinion, but I think it has a lot of potential, so I'm sticking with it. I'm just like holding out that if they do more.
So is it made by the same people that did that one Viking show that everybody likes, or is it like a different?
I think it has the similar people. Like
Okay.
I think like some of the writers are the same, but I think that there are differences in it for sure. So the quality of the production is a little bit different. I think it's great. I think the storylines are pretty big. So for instance, and like I'm not giving away any spoilers, like a big part of it takes place in Norway and right, like stuff like that. But then also they've kind of like leaked into Novgorod, which is like a settlement by Vikings who went down I can't remember what river it is, but essentially it's the founding of Ukraine and stuff like that, like that area. And so it's pretty cool. Like it's like a Kievan Rus. Sorry, that's where it is, the Rus. And so it's like very interesting and fascinating where they've kind of like kept those universes together. But there's also like one who's the king of all Denmark, or the king of all like Norway and Denmark and all this, but he's also the king of England for a while. So it's got a lot of interesting stuff. It does have some things rooted in historical fact, but as always, it's greatly exaggerated.
Yeah,
I love
I'm
it.
sure.
And I love a good sword battle, and they have some shield maidens, and they talk about the gods, and it's a fight between Christians and the pagans, which I really enjoy as well, because I think I have a lot of thoughts on that kind of stuff, because it's always like the new religion shows up, kills the rest of the people, and says this is the perfect religion. And so this kind of highlights the ideas of the people who might have been experiencing the other, which I think is fun. And then I gotta keep shouting out what I've been watching on YouTube. I'm a big YouTube series watcher. The guy Martin Doolard, he is still building and rebuilding his little fortress and fort, and I love it. I can watch it for hours. Like he's rebuilding these 2 little stone cabins, and like a couple weeks ago there was a huge snowstorm in his videos, and he has to like rebuild everything and like go through and reset a bunch of stuff up, and his tent collapses in the snow. And like that's exciting to me, and it's like a no frills series. Like it's super basic. This one guy filming all this stuff, and then he does it, but it's like such good value. Like, yeah, if you haven't watched it, check
What
it out.
episode does he fight the bear?
Oh man, the cocaine bear arrives in episode 91, and which is still a few weeks away. No, I'm just kidding, but it's beautiful. Italian Alps, stuff like that. So super cool. Awesome. Enjoying it. But that's what I've been watching.
I mentioned that I started it. I don't think I mentioned that I finished Beef before, did I? It was really, really good. Like it's A24, right? Steven Yeun, Ali Wong.
They make TV shows now?
I guess. Yeah. And it's on Netflix. Well, because it's Netflix produced and A24 produced, something like that. Some sort of joint venture. And at first it was just really funny and cool. And when I say funny, I mean it was really funny. Because obviously, yeah, if you've seen any of the trailers, you know, oh yeah, Steven Yeun and Ali Wong, they have beef, right? That's like what the show is about. And when they're there together arguing or in their own lives arguing and stuff like that, they can just be so hilarious. But the show also gets really serious and takes really deep dives. I mean, very A24-esque. Takes deep dives into these character lives and why they're doing these things and why they end up having such strong feelings, and it gets crazy. Like, it is 100% I recommend to everyone if you have some time to watch Beef on Netflix. And then besides that, I started New Girl. I've watched about half the episodes just like when they were on, when other people were watching them. So a lot of them I've seen, but I've never watched it from start to finish all the way through. And so I'm doing that now, and I'm definitely really enjoying it and glad that I'm finally doing that. But yeah, so I'm loving that. And then quick plug for our new mini series. I'm going to talk about a lot of the trailers that I've watched really quick, because that's about the only other thing I've been watching since the last one. So if you haven't seen, check out our new mini series Fast Forward, which we have on the channel as well, where we're kind of be breaking down movie news and rumors and everything like that. But since then, literally right before we started recording that last episode, they dropped one of the trailers that I was also really excited to see. They dropped a new trailer for Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which looks good. A lot of the casting I thought was spot on. It was like, this was how I pictured it. Like when I was, reading this book in my mind, like this is how I pictured this character, and other ones not as much. And so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it all ends up.
So I didn't know they dropped the trailer until I got on the gram, and straight up, the first meme / whatever I see is someone goes, "Is President Snow hot?" I was like, "What?" So I went and watched it. It looks so good, though.
It does look good. I feel like even though I don't know his name, sorry, but the guy who plays Snow, who plays Cornelius, he looks pretty close to what I was imagining in my head, the way they described him, but I don't know, something about the actor, at least when I was watching the trailer, just didn't seem right. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler, who plays opposite of him, is
Lucy
Gray Baird. She looks nothing like what I thought the character would look like, but she seems perfect. Like, I'm super excited.
I do remember, because I actually forgot that movie was happening for a minute, just because it's been a while since
It's been a while.
I watched because I never read I didn't read the prequel book,
I didn't
but
either.
I read all the Hunger Games and watched the movies and stuff. But I do remember him looking I was like, man, he looks very, very young and very not like how I would picture a Donald Sutherland looking like when he's that age. I'm curious.
Did you guys know that Donald Sutherland was on what's the international organization? Is it FBI or CIA?
I don't know
whichever one's international. He was on their watch list for years because he was anti-war during some of his younger years, and so he was heavily watched when he was coming into America and stuff. Because this guy is anti-war and anti-America. He's a Canadian, so
that's a real picture of him. Man, he looks fair. They're trying really hard.
Bobbo.
They are trying really hard.
It's like Dumbledore turning into Jude Law over here.
They're just trying to reverse Longbottom, the thing. Long-bottoming old TR.
Long-bottoming?
Do you remember that when that was a thing?
I didn't know that was a verb, but
it is now.
Everybody knows.
It is now. But sorry, Josh, what are your other trailers and thoughts on trailers?
I watched a trailer for Meg 2.
Oh, God.
I haven't seen that one yet.
It looks so stupid.
It does.
I never saw the first one.
I saw the trailer drop today for Flamin' Hot.
Oh, I can't wait for that one. I didn't watch the trailer yet, but I know the premise of it.
It seems this was...
Does it look good? Please say it looks good.
My buddy messaged it to me, a buddy Kate who's been on the podcast before, and I watched the trailer all the way through, and I said, this looks simultaneously dope AF and completely unnecessary. You guys haven't seen the trailer. It's basically about... It's like a movie about the guy who helped or who invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos, pretty much.
Do you want to know why it's even more like what did you say? Worthless, or what did you say?
Unnecessary.
Why it's even more unnecessary?
Why?
During production of the movie, I heard that they actually came out and debunked the book that it's based on, and so the story that it's actually based on is like
Not even
majority
real.
false at this point.
Great.
It's
I don't
a
care.
lie.
I think it's gonna be fun. It's a movie about the creation of the Flaming Hot Cheeto. Come on, what more do you guys want from a movie?
So that one, and then the last, not last two, one more really quick that I also watched that came out today, The Crowded Room, which is a new Apple TV movie with Tom Holland. That looks very good as well.
This is going to be the one silver lining of the writer's strike. Single silver lining. Once there's nothing good coming out anymore because the writers can't write anymore, I'll finally be able to catch up on all these things I've been behind on.
There you go. And then get better quality from higher paid writers afterwards.
Yeah, in the end of it, right?
Or
go.
ChatGPT.
And then
I want all my movies written by a soulless machine. I don't want.
Did you guys see the meme of the board that was just like Chat GPT doesn't benefit from childhood trauma?
Yeah, that was it. That's why I've been laughing about
GPT
it.
can't write because it doesn't benefit from childhood trauma.
To all the writers out there who are striking, we hope that you get what you're asking for, and we appreciate the work that you've done.
the final two, which I thought we'd be most excited for, Dune Part 2.
Yes.
Super excited for that one. Got a long wait ahead of us, but it's starting to come to fruition. And then the new Oppenheimer trailer that dropped. Did you guys see it? Oh my gosh. Whenever they drop a new trailer for either Barbie or Oppenheimer, my excitement level, like they jump each other. They leapfrog each other.
All right. Should we get into this movie?
What do we watch?
I tried to think of something
Did you forget what we watched?
No, I remember. I just tried to think of something funny to say.
I was thinking the
I
same
know how to-
Guardians. I kind of
Guys.
just low batted right there, but I was like,
Guys, I get it. I have one in the group too. I have one in the pod too. I understand.
Nice.
There you go. Does that work?
Very nice.
There you go.
reference. That was good.
perfect. So this week we're talking Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the final James Gunn film in the trilogy before he's out. He's done. He's over to DC. He's leading the DC cinematic universe. However, we're going to divert back and talk about specifically Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, a beautiful masterpiece indeed. We're not quite to the spoilers section yet, so I'm going to actually ask you guys. I know we're letterboxed people. I haven't updated mine in a while. But I wanted to ask, what was your rating on Letterboxd? And I want to start with Josh.
I'll just do it straight. I'm pretty sure I have it right here.
Just read it. Yeah.
4 stars on Letterboxd. I wrote a satisfying end to the Guardians trilogy. And then just a quote from the movie. We'll all fly away together one last time into the forever and beautiful sky.
Oh.
I love it.
Oh, sorry. It was just like, it's too good to not put it there, you know?
So
I didn't have anything else to say because I was like, it's a beautiful end of the trilogy. It wraps it up nice. And it was emotional, right? It was more emotional than the other ones were, and rightfully so.
Did you shed a couple tears? I was sitting next to you.
definitely
I was crying, so I didn't have any idea what else was
I
doing.
definitely shed a couple tears. I mean, I'm very... I've got my dogs, and so I'm very, animal conscious and very animal lovey. And so this movie could be, it was tough a couple times to watch, without, that's not really spoilers. They talk about that. People have mentioned it. So
I think that's like every headline is,
Yeah.
don't watch this if you're an animal lover.
Yeah,
It'll make
yeah.
you cry.
Well, apparently PETA rated this as the perfect animal film. So I guess that's worth something.
like a film, they said, it's a good film to highlight issues about animal
Yeah,
cruelty.
I
They
think
really
that's
did
what it
come out
is.
like that.
Yeah, they did. Okay.
Unless it was a fake headline, but I saw the same thing.
ChatGPT wrote that too, so you never know. But anyhow,
Casey, just go down the line.
I rated a 5.
You changed it. Because we talked on the night, because you don't actually have it on Letterboxd.
I don't.
But we talked that night, and you said 4 as well.
Yeah, so I went to 5. And here's the reason why. And I didn't write a quote, I don't have one. I just enjoyed myself. Like, there was no part of that movie after, thinking about it. Because, when you first leave the movie, sometimes your first impression can be, critical of your expectations, right? And then I sat that night and I was like, and Josh knows this. I had a terrible night that night. We left the movie. I had to rush my dog to the emergency room. And this is like 10 o'clock at night. We're driving back from the movie. So I get to the emergency room and I'm like sitting in there, like thinking about my dog and trying to think about other things to distract myself from the spiraling that can happen, you know, when you're like, shit, my dog's going to die. My dog is still alive. My dog is well. She's healthy to go off of that, which is great. But I was like, I loved this movie. Like, and I don't have anything I really hate about it. And so it deserves a 5 because if I'm thinking about like a warm blanket, that was this movie for me. So that's all I have to say. I really loved it. So I'd give it a 5.
I can't remember the last time I actually went on Letterboxd, so I'll just have to give my base opinion on it. But I'd probably give it a 5 too, just based on just even after like the more I've thought about it, like after the movie, like because when me and Vince saw it, like after like pretty much right after we were like, oh man, that movie was really good, like really really good. And usually after that, I tend to kind of if I really liked it a lot, I'll kind of like think about it and see if there's like stuff that kind of bugged me too much about it or anything. But all I could really think about was just like how like emotionally invested like I was in it, and just like how, I mean, I don't want to take too much time, but just in general, like I thought it was a pretty perfect way to kind of like end like the Guardians, like the Guardians as they are right now, like the perfect way to kind of end that story and kind of end that trilogy of films that James Gunn like directed. So yeah, I love that.
I heard someone say, and I'm sorry, I love that really quickly, but I heard someone say that these are first James Gunn films and then Marvel films second. And
100%.
I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, because like Star-Lord could come back, the Guardians could come back in a different way, and we'll talk about this more later, but like they will never, like, it's kind of like when a band reassembles after 25 years, something like that. They're going on a reunion tour. They're not the same band as they were before because things have changed. People have aged, experiences are different. They can still play their songs very similarly and they still have the same name, but they're no longer the same. So I think if whatever we see of the future of this group, they will not be the same because James Gunn is the head of that ship. He's the captain. So it's going to be different. But
yeah, I think Feige said like, as much as this can be a director's movie in the Marvel universe, this is a James Gunn movie or something along those lines. You know, like,
and I mean, there are so many weird things in there that are just
so
like,
many.
This is very James Gunn, especially like even if you don't go off of like the other like Guardian stuff, like even like some of the, I was thinking of like he directed a movie called Slither. I don't know if you ever saw.
I never did.
Very, very weird kind of like horror stuff.
that was an old horror movie, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. It had what's her name? The girl. She directed Cocaine Bear.
It has,
Elizabeth Banks. She was
okay,
in it,
yeah, but it has like a white, like a kind of a whitish. The cover of the DVD has like a
and
whitish
there's like
thing.
there's like these little things going into like
Yes.
a bathtub. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, no. But like thinking back then, no. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
But yeah, no, just like that. I mean, we're not going to go into two spoilers here, but there's certain points in the movie where you're just like, this is a very weird thing that you wouldn't really expect in like a kind of like a tentpole superhero movie, especially like in like the very beginning part where they go into like, certain spots and stuff like that. And then also just like some of the, I don't know. I was telling Vince a little bit. I'm like, I'm surprised some of this stuff was in a PG-13 rated movie, especially near like the end and stuff. So I don't like those kind of touches make me feel like, okay, this isn't just like a run of the mill kind of like Marvel movie where they kind of polish everything off. Like it's very, I feel like it's very much like has its own voice.
Mm-hmm.
So much of its own voice. The one time in the entire movie that I was like distracted and kind of taken out from it was when that little kid got up to go use the bathroom and they came back, and then later in the movie something happened and I thought, man, that little kid shouldn't be watching that right now.
So full disclosure, how old was that? That kid was like,
He was young.
He was like 4 or 5 years old. Like I'm like,
maybe
you should not be in.
Well, you'd know better than that.
No, he was pretty well, maybe like 5 or 6.
That's what I was thinking.
But like for example, I feel like he was younger than my kids. My twins just turned 7. And like I probably wouldn't take him to this movie because there's a lot of like scary stuff, sad stuff. And he was like, he was like 5 or 6. He was like so tiny, and I was like, and like a lot of time he'd be like, "Mom, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh man, you should have brought this kid at this movie."
Of that, Bob.
Yeah.
There was a baby in ours.
There was.
There was a freaking baby in ours. It's fine.
It's a baby can't know. Baby doesn't know.
The
what's
baby
going
won't
on.
next door
remember.
to you guys.
That kid kept looking at the screen like, "Mom, what's going on?"
That's funny. Yeah, no, I'll have to make those decisions one day for my son, so we'll have to see. Vince, what was your rating?
This movie was amazing. I loved it. Every single bit of this movie was so good. It was funny. It was dark. It was so well balanced. It was creative. The set design was amazing. It ended and I was just like, I leaned over to Tyler and I was just like, there's nothing that I can think of to nitpick on this. Having a couple of days passed on it, there's 2 little things that I can nitpick that are the dumbest 2 little things in the world. One, felt a little long, just a tiny bit long. They could have probably cut a little bit of the action out, no big deal. And 2, I kind of missed the presence of Rocket through the whole thing, but you can't have this story without Rocket doing his thing and learning his backstory. I love this movie. This is the best Marvel movie that I think I've seen since the Spider-Man Far From Home, No Way Home movie.
Easily.
No Way Home.
And I love that they just gave James Gunn just free reign to just be weird. I love how weird this movie is. It's so creative. It's so visually pleasing. It's got some of these like crazy space special effects that they look great, but then there's so much just like actual physical sets and stuff that they've made. I read an article that said the amount of like special effects they've done on faces, like practical effects that they did for the faces for like the animal people, like this is like setting a record for the number of prosthetics that they put on characters and stuff. It's just this perfect blend of realism and special effects, and it's funny, and it's not like my biggest gripe of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was just like every beat ends with a joke and only like 50% maybe actually land or are good. This one's perfectly balanced where it's a dramatic moment and it doesn't end with a Drax saying my nipples hurt joke or something like that. You know, like it's funny, but it also like allows us to like feel something in these dramatic moments and doesn't get undercut ever. I feel like he's found this perfect balance. Again, I'm famously not a Drax fan. Loved him in this movie. He was perfect in it. I think there was only one time in the entire movie that Drax did that over-the-top laugh, and it didn't linger on it. It was quick. It was easy. It might have been a couple other times, but never again. And he cracked me up every time. His ending was beautiful. All the characters' endings were beautiful. I have so many things to say. I can't wait to get into the spoiler section of this because I loved this movie so much.
Did you say your actual rating as if we couldn't guess it?
1 star. Just kidding.
And that's all. Thanks so much.
And that's all, folks.
Yeah, it's a 5-star movie in my book. I know it's not a perfect movie, but I rate if you look at my letterbox, it's a mess. Like people would look at it and be like, "Batman v Superman, 5 stars," you know, because it's not a perfect movie. I rate a 5-star movie on if I liked it or not, and if it's done well enough and I liked it or not, and I want to watch it again and again and again. And this is one that I would want to watch again and again and again. If I had to rank the 3, this may be recency bias, so we'll see if it changes. But my order would be number 3 is my favorite, number 1, and number 2. But all of them are up there at like 4, 4.5, 5-star movies. Loved them all. I love this franchise.
Let's move on, though, to the spoiler section really quickly, if that's cool. So just so everyone knows, if you haven't watched the movie, spoilers are ahead. Don't let us ruin the movie for you.
So first and most important thing.
Okay.
Adam Warlock got his shirt off scene.
Yes, he did.
Will Poulter got to show off his physique. Sorry, that was a callback to the last episode.
Exactly.
We talked about it.
And it was nice.
That was a joke. We can move on.
No, okay, but I rated this 4 stars. You guys all rated it 5 stars, and I'm sure we'll have small things that we'll kind of nitpick throughout, but it'll be mostly love. So I just wanted to go over a couple of my nitpicks, what kept this from being a 5-star movie for me.
Yes.
One of them, since you mentioned Adam Warlock, was I thought Will Poulter did great. He was very himbo in this, you know, just very like that dumb, stupid, strong guy, right, that they have. Sorry. It's like, I know the kids slang
lingo.
these days. Himbo. I can say it. I'm still young.
I had no idea what you were talking about. Actually, I was like,
A himbo is like the big buff, like
Bro bimbo.
like the
bro, bimbo. The mirror does it again.
Bro bimbo.
Why?
You don't like him?
It's not that I didn't like him. It was that when you look at the story and where it went, it felt kind of unnecessary to me. And like I said, I liked him.
I think it's because he had to deliver on the promise that he set up from Guardians 2 and put him in
Right.
there. And then he had 10 years of Marvel continuity to keep up with.
Right.
That he had to pay it off, but he also had to write it in a way that I'm interested to see what the original script looked like before he had to tweak things. Like Gamora hadn't died at the time when he wrote the original script and all those kind of things. I liked Adam Warlock a lot in this, actually. And it kind of reminded me, like, yeah, you're right. He didn't really, like, play a huge, like, there wasn't a big reason for him to be in this. I think the way that they did introduce him was a lot better than, like, how they used Ironheart, how they introduced Ironheart in Wakanda Forever or something.
Agreed.
It reminded me of kind of like when they introduced Black Panther in Civil War, where it's like, this is a character we've never seen before, but we're going to use him a little bit, just kind of get a peek into him to see what, and then in the future, he's already here, so we don't have to go into like the whole,
Like, who is he and like where did he
yeah,
come from?
and do like a origin story with him because he's just here now, and then we can like tease it throughout the thing. I feel like that's kind of how Adam Warlock was in this one, where he's just like, he didn't play a huge role, probably didn't need to be here, but the scenes that he was in were good, and in the future, I think we're established now and we can run with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I think it's good. And so he was forward because I was super surprised when I saw Elizabeth Debicki was in the cast list, and she's the one who plays Aisha, I think her name, right? Which is like the mother.
That the High
to him,
Sovereign.
whatever, the High Sovereign lady.
Gosh, she's great.
And I guess she's really good. She's in Tenet. She's the same person who's the main actress in Tenet.
Okay.
It's that one.
She's amazing.
She's really good. But also, when I saw her in it, and then I saw why she was in it, I was like, okay, it makes sense, right? Continuity-wise, the Sovereign are still mad about everything, right? It makes sense. But just like as it played out, I was like, this is kind of weird and unnecessary. And they made a big deal about him like trying to save her, and then she died and stuff. And I was like, I don't.
See, but for me, like that makes sense just in terms of like it doesn't just like if it kind of for me like I could totally get that, and but on the kind of the flip side too, it kind of like builds off of not just like the what happened in volume 2, but then also when you're thinking about because we're full spoilers now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about high evolutionary or the high
Evolution.
high evolutionary, and like he actually built like created the sovereign and like basically built her, and then she built Adam Warlock. So there's kind of like that interesting kind of layers and parallels of like trying to build like a perfect human, perfect, being or whatever. So I think that kind of like just like with the story, like it kind of fits in there. But I do think, it makes sense. Like it's like why, like outside of the ending where you're like, okay, Adam Warlock is part of the Guardians now, which is cool. Like I'm excited to see like where they go with that. Forward. Like he doesn't really like he has an arc, but for the most part, like he is a little inconsequential in terms of like them like stopping the high evolutionary. Although he saves Peter Quill, but I don't know. I
also like how he kicked off the whole story.
That was way cool.
Like this guy, the high evolutionary with this god complex, uses his little children to go and get the one thing that he wants. I thought it was a good introduction to, or a good way to kick off and a good way to tie in all of these different species characters into a whole overarching story. The Sovereign, I thought when I first saw Guardians 2 that they were just going to be kind of like this one-off thing, and they weren't going to come back. They're just going to kick off that story and then disappear. No, they play a whole role into this whole world that they've created. Even the monsters that they fought in Guardians 2 play a role in why this all ties together, with this high evolutionary being this like evil overarching villain that has pulled all of these people into one thing.
What was cool about that too is like basically Adam Warlock and his like I forget what his mother's name in the movie is.
Aisha, I think.
Aisha, okay. But like how terrified she is of the high evolutionary, and like the reason why she like because basically like Adam Warlock's like not completely
Well, they woke him up early.
Yeah, they
right?
woke him up too early, trying to help him get Rocket, basically, because she's like terrified of like disappointing him, and because basically he created the Sovereign, so it kind of like all. I just liked how that all kind of connected together.
I definitely hadn't thought about the second half of creating the species with the high evolutionary and their connection, and how
It's a little like that's something you have to like think about, because that was one thing I kept thinking about after the movie. I was like, how many species did he make? And I mean, you could probably go super nerdy into it.
Well, and that was what was fascinating, is I felt like he was like in the center of the web, and there was just all this spiral essentially out
everything's
from him,
coming back to him,
and it's all just connected, which I thought was really cool. And the Alter Earth, or what is it called? Counter Earth. Thank you. I thought that was pretty interesting, like that it was Earth, right? Like I was like, why Earth? And like it kind of like gave me. There's another show where they go to Earth and the people are just completely different, but it's the same. I'm trying to remember what that is, but I thought that was fascinating. So really cool. I can get where you're coming from though. Adam Warlock.
Did you like him?
I loved him. I'm not trying to like say anything, but Adam Warlock's character kind of like almost at times would seem forced, I think, if you weren't quite certain about him. But I really liked it where, and you guys have already talked about the opening scene where Aisha, right, is her name, the high priestess or whatever of the Sovereign, and then Him's there. Him's there. Adam Warlock is there, and then the all the characters kind of like linking together, because the Sovereign are still on the trail just because of the batteries and how much it's cost them to try and defeat the Guardians, right? And how much they've decimated. So it made a lot of sense to me, and I thought that was a lot of fun. However, Adam Warlock was not what I was expecting, and I think that was what made him more enjoyable for me. But I also, thanks Will Poulter for that shirt off scene. Great time. It was wonderful.
I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect from him, because like I said, the comic book and the video game that I played, the version of Adam Warlock from that is very, very different. A lot of people on the internet described him as like a Jesus Christ figure, just like this. And he's not that in this, which I didn't mind. I have no real connection to Adam Warlock. And he's so powerful, that I like this idea of just like, he's out of the oven a little early, so he's not quite there. He's figuring things out still. And I think there's going to be a development of that character to become more and more smarter and older and more powerful, kind of like we saw with Groot, Anyway. Well, I thought it was cool.
Are the Sovereign just born adults? Is that how they kind of come out? Because they're cooked like that? I don't know. I don't know enough about the Sovereign, but I thought that was interesting. Sorry, Josh, we interjected on your
No, it's okay, because we had a conversation about that. I just kind of have two other quick ones that we can also kind of go off of. I'll do this one first because we'll just kind of talk about this one all the way throughout, so we don't necessarily have to mention it specifically right now. I thought the comedy in this one was really good, but there were a few times throughout the movie where the comedic timing between the characters felt really strange. Just like you talk about being taken out of a movie because something feels weird. That happened to me a few times during the movie. And I can't remember specifically anything right now, but there were just a couple of times where I was like, oh, this feels like kind of strange. Like, it's not like the other movies. I didn't feel as in it. And it was only a couple times, and there were other times where the comedy was just perfect, in my opinion. And then this one, I don't think will be controversial, but maybe it will. I felt like we talked a lot in the last one about how much we loved and how huge a role the music plays in the movies. And I think of the three, this one was definitely the weakest music-wise as far as the songs that they chose to put in for the most part. And then on the other hand, there were some musical moments that were incredible and, had me pretty much crying. So
yeah,
I felt like overall it was the weakest of the three, but there were still incredible musical moments.
There's no way they can ever beat the Volume 1, Awesome Mix Volume 1. That one is so good to me. Really liked the use of Creep in the beginning, though, of this one.
I called it being a sad, weird song.
You did.
Yeah. We're sitting in theater. I was like, it's going to be a sad, weird song. And
that's one of the things that threw me off the most is like the intro to the other two is just like, you guys ready to party? And then, kick off the song.
Mr. Blue Sky, come and get your love.
Or whatever, This one is the opposite. It's just like, we're setting a tone here. We're not going to party in this one. We're going to the serious, dramatic stuff. But I'd agree. Like, this one is the weakest of the three.
Yeah, that said, I mean, there's some that just like hit really hard. Like, I mean, I'm trying to think because I was kind of the same way too. Like, there was points I've even told Vince. I was like, there were points where like in a normal Guardians, like the first two, you would like hear music, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is the part where
do something cool.
Yeah, we're doing something cool. But for the most part, you're so invested in kind of like the story of like saving Rocket that when you're hearing these songs, they don't really like hit those same notes. Like they're trying to hit you a different way. But like I thought Creep was good. I really liked when they go to Counter Earth, that song. What song was that? Was that
I
like
can't
I
even
Care
remember the
We
songs
Care a
for this.
Lot, like from Faith No More or something? I would have to look it up.
can't
But
say.
like when that song hits, like when they're going to Counter Earth and stuff, like everything really after Counter Earth, I was just like glued to my seat.
That was good.
And then I really liked the Florence and the Machines.
Yes.
The Dog Days Are Over. Like I thought that was a really good, just kind of like ending kind of crescendo to like the whole movie.
I have a lot to say about that scene. We can talk later. And then on top of that, since we're on the topic of music, one of my favorite scenes, which we'll also probably talk about if we talk about the action, but No Sleep Till Brooklyn, I also thought was a great one
That's the other one I was thinking of. Yeah.
that they had as well.
That's
That
the
was
Beastie
really
Boys
good.
one. Right? Yep.
Tell Brooklyn. Sorry. We're probably going
When
to get
they're
a
in
lot
the-
of copyright infringements on this episode.
No,
It was
it's gotta
good,
be pretty
though.
checked.
Really quickly, I agree with you, by the way. I think of the weaker soundtracks, the weaker soundtrack of all the films, in my opinion. However, I loved that. So this is what I thought was really cool about this, and I thought about it during the movie. We've been waiting for Rocket to figure out what he is, because the whole entire movie they call him a rat. The whole entire series they call him a rabbit. They call him a raccoon. They call him a mouse. They call him a fox.
Trash Panda.
Trash Panda, like all these different names, and so his identity
Bear.
is the entire time is kind of up for debate a little bit. Like, what is Rocket? So when we finally get to this moment, he's kind of like, it's interesting for me at least how Marvel kind of does like this figuring stuff out, processing your life type thing, right? With Thor, we saw a completely unique arc based off of his experiences, right? And how he was, and how people were so upset that for a while we had depressed, sad, fat bro Thor type thing, right? And then like with Rocket, like it's interesting because he's an animal, right? Because he's an animal, his arc was more beloved in some way, in my opinion, to a lot of people, because like, oh, we love raccoons. Like, raccoons are weird. I have a raccoon on my computer, right? But it's just so fascinating that like this arc of like self-identifying, like, who am I, where did I come from, type thing.
I mean, he is adorable, and you do love adorable things, right? But also, you just have so much sympathy for what he goes through. I mean, any character, Nebula too. I can't believe how well Nebula worked for me in this movie. She's always been just like a side character for me that I've just kind of been like, I get it, she's cool, she's mean, she's got edges, whatever, whatever. She's great in this. I loved how her and Rocket have this connection because they both pretty much went through a very similar event growing up where their fathers are just abusive and tortured them and tore them apart and put them back together and replaced pieces from them. I loved seeing Nebula's like reaction to Rocket, number one, being hurt, and then number two, when he gets better. Her just like, you can tell she's got these edges, but you can tell like she cares about this. She connects with this little raccoon. But yeah, like you watch these characters, and especially in this where it doesn't pull any punches, it shows you, the stitches, the pain, not only to Rocket, but all of his little cute friends and all these things that you go through. You can't help but just like 100% sympathize with these characters, whether they're humans or animals, and really just
I
hope
thought the
that they get
VFX
better.
for the animals were like so good. Like
Mhm.
it was amazing. This like how like obviously it's like they're not real because it's like Teefs has like tires for legs, but like just like the way that they animated them and the way that they told the story, like I was so invested like through all of that stuff from Rocket's backstory.
Floor was horrifying and cute. Like the first time I saw Floor, and
That's the rabbit, right?
yeah. I was
Like
just
Spider Rabbit?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
But
man-
want to say, such a great, like when you bring up these animals, like I loved each and every single one of them, even though they were terrifying monstrosities. They reminded me, going to Toy Story, of Sid's spider animal, like that he has in Toy Story. That's what it kind of reminded me of, Floor.
Yeah.
But I loved kind of like, it's kind of interesting, and like this is like how you make friends in dark places type thing. Like Rocket as a pup is thrown into like this cage, and the first people he meets is like terrifying Floor, Teefs, and I just forgot
Lila.
Lila. And it's just that would be terrifying. But he just openly accepts them and welcomes them kind of into that's his family, right? That's his actual family, and so to him, it's such a beautiful thing, but like terrifyingly good. Terrifyingly good.
And not only like, and them too, like immediately accepting him as part of the family, and they're stuck in this terrible situation, but all of them have this like hope, you know, of something better. And as long as you have friends that you're close with, it doesn't matter what they look like, you know, it's just like this theme of hope in the worst situations and getting through this past traumas and looking forward to better days. It's just so deep and so good.
He's looking at his little hands and he's saying hurt, you know, and his head's shaven and like Lila just like reaching and taking care of him. Like what a crazy thing. And you're right, no like there was no like cheat over the.
And this is why I
struggles.
I can't say that my nitpick, you know, like I did miss Rocket in the group with the Guardians, you know, playing off of Peter and arguing with each other and fighting with each other. But I can't say that I would want it any other way, because I loved seeing this backstory and seeing what he went through and how he became who he is. And not only that, but by the end of the movie, like how he finally, after all these years of pushing people away and being this like, what does Yondu call him? Like a professional asshole, you know, where he's just like, he's experienced loss so many times that he just keeps people at arm's distance so that he can't be hurt again like he was that day. Finally, by the end of this movie, coming to some kind of closure and opening up and being ready to accept love and friendship and family again, like he did with the original Guardians. Guys, this is a 5-star movie. This is a 5-star movie.
This is so good. I think what it comes to me and what it feels like, right, is I love the like they kind of talk about him as like a father type figure, because like Peter at the beginning of this movie is just in absolute ruin, right? Like he's just an alcoholic, he's just sleeping all the time, and you know, Nebula is being the responsible adult of the fam.
Just so depressed because his girlfriend's gone.
Yeah, like it's hard, right? And I love how Rocket, like, they show the value of someone that well. Like he snaps out of pretty much everything. And it's like, we have to save Rocket. Like, is it the most beautiful and gracious thing? But like, it gives him purpose in this film, like Star-Lord. It gives him an identity that is like, I have to save Rocket because he's like a father figure to me, just like Yondu was. So I thought it was beautiful.
I think him and Rocket are just best friends. Like they just, like I said in the last episode, they love each other, but the way that this entire group shows love to each other is bickering and fighting and banter, just like a regular family. I mean, half of these conversations, I mean, okay, me and my dad's relationship is very similar to this, where if you listen to me and my dad talk, it sounds like we are fighting. We're yelling at each other. I'm stubborn, he's stubborn, you know? But in the end, like, we just forget about all the like mean things that I say to him. He's always very respectful to me. And he pretends like it never happens. You know, it's kind of the same thing as this, where they're fighting all the time and they're bickering, but in the end, like, they really, really do love each other. And Peter Quill and Rocket are, if you ask anyone except for Drax, are best friends.
Second best friend.
Second best friend.
I want whatever those nuts are that Drax eats, by the way, the whole entire time.
Nuts.
Zarg nuts or whatever. Yeah.
Weren't those in the holiday special too?
Yeah.
I was looking at Vince. I'm like, that's a nice callback.
Yeah,
you can't have any. They're all gone.
Yeah, it's just very fascinating, like how the whole cycle of this story has went on and happened.
And then Peter, who has just lost everything.
Yeah.
Like he lost his mom when he was a kid. He lost his home planet, taken off the planet. His biological father decides he wants to turn him into a battery and he has to kill his own father. His stepfather ends up dying in the last one. And then his girlfriend falls off a cliff and dies and somehow comes back. Like Peter has gone through, and he says it in the movie, everyone I love dies. He's gone through enough. His best friend Rocket gets pretty much killed. He's like I said earlier, he's willing to do anything to save his best friend. And I love that. This kicks off the adventure of just...
This was the next John Wick film we deserved. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's a good answer.
No. So we're talking about a little bit about Star-Lord, and I remember in the previous episode we were talking a little bit about what's going to happen in the Star-Lord Gamora storyline, right? What's going to end up being that closure, and I really didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, how are they going to do this? Because they're going to have to reconcile them, and they're going to have to get back together somehow, right? I was just assuming that and whatnot. And the way this story ended up playing out in her new life, right? Because the events of Endgame ended up changing the future and the way that events transpired, and so Gamora ended up becoming a Ravager and everything like that. It was really, I feel like it was the perfect way for the Gamora and Star-Lord story to go, for it to end up this way, because even though the actual person is the same person biologically, because it speaks really strongly to the experiences of your life really change who you are. And it was really sweet, and it was really thinking, I mean, they mentioned when they were talking to each other, and you get to the end where it's kind of sappy, but you know that they're still not going to end up together, and he's accepted that. And she mentions his name. She was like, I bet we were fun, right? And he's like, oh, you wouldn't believe. It was really, really cute. And I was, oh my goodness, that's so sweet. But it was also just so gratifying. And also in the Dog Days Are Over music scene, where we're seeing mostly the community on Nowhere, it also cuts to her with the Ravagers. And that is her family in this way that the universe ended up panning out. That when the events transpired differently and she ended up becoming Ravagers, she was able to find throughout the movie, she was able to see why. Because originally she thought, how was I ever, in a group with these people? Why, that never would have worked. That's not who I am. She was able to find that and see, okay, I can understand why we would have worked. But it was also able to show that in this different universe and the different way that things transpired, that she had a different family in this one. She was able to find that sense of community that she was looking for with the Ravagers and move forward from there. And so it was really beautiful to see their story end up not as I had expected at all, but the way that really was best for the character moving forward. I thought it was a beautiful storyline that did not go any way how I thought it was going to, but just blew my expectations away.
Yeah, that's how I was really kind of like, okay, they're probably going to do a thing where she ends up falling in love with him again and kind of like going that cliche route. So I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I was super surprised with how they're like, no, they didn't end up together. They're like end up like, she ends up kind of like respecting him and stuff. But for the most part, like, they're not, it's not like a kind of like stereotypical, like, romantic comedy thing where they end up being together at the end. And also something that we and Vince talked about that we loved is how like this Gamora is like a hardcore, like crazy Gamora. It's like taking hostages and shooting people.
True.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not like, it's been so, cause like what you have like 4 movies of an arc with her where she's kind of become like, part of the Guardians, and she's, tries to not do like Thanos stuff.
And even when you first meet her in Guardians 1, she's already kind of coming over onto the good side.
Yeah, she's not like this hard and
she's trying
like,
to escape Thanos.
Yeah,
you never see her assassin hard killer version.
Yeah, like when she's in that, when they're in that weird like flesh planet thing, and she's just like threatening to like kill people, and you're like, oh my gosh, I did not anticipate this. Like I
This
love that.
I loved her. I loved seeing her this way. Just running in, guns blazing. All these stories that you hear about her, you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. This is how she kept beating Nebula growing up over and over and over again.
Yeah, assassin her is pretty dope. I liked the fleshy planet. I just want to talk.
That's a
about
very
that.
James Gunn thing too. I was like, there's no way like in another. I don't think another director would come up with like this weird flesh planet with these weird people wearing bodysuits that look like flesh, but they're not flesh.
Let's talk about entering Nathan Fillion into the MCU,
Yes.
huh?
that was a fun little like welcoming thing, and I immediately thought about Big Mouth. There's a character in there who's obsessed with Nathan Fillion, and so I was like, I heard her say Nathan Fillion, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, nice. But no, I thought that was a weird, cool planet. I also liked about that episode how these guys are supposed to be like so feared, and he just going through and like disengaging or helping them push through the force fields and stuff like that, and like that was really cool. Star-Lord, and I don't know, that fleshy planet was like a weird trip to me, like kind of like thing. I was like, this is like something you dream like when you wake up at like 5 a.m. Be like,
push those weird goopy button things.
Yeah.
To, like, what is going on?
Or they put like the thing in, they're like, oh, our spacesuits went out. Those spacesuits, by the way, were my favorite. They were like Polaroid colors, so it was kind of like the Polaroid logo colors. So that was fun. But yeah, no, I love that part. Can we talk
even
about
that scene right there with Peter Quill like kind of begging Gamora to come back to him, and they're like, that was a good comic bit where there's He's confessing his love and like trying to convince her. Open line. Yeah, and then Mantis, who another character that's kind of been like sidelined for me this entire time, just turns around in this movie and becomes a immediate favorite of mine. Mantis was awesome in this, and I didn't realize how freaking powerful she was. Like her and Drax are the perfect pairing. Wasn't really into it in the holiday special because it's just a little too over the top for me. But again, the balance of these two together, it's so funny when she makes that like the guy fall in love with Drax so they can get into the building. God, that was good.
He's like, not again, every time.
You are deeply in love with him. And she's just like so excited to mess with him.
Well, because then it also ends up paying off really well when we get to the end. And we talked about the end of everyone's stories and where they end up going and how Drax and Mantis really ended up having a connection a lot stronger than you thought when they talk about them leaving and kind of going different ways and doing what they need to, how it was actually kind of hard, like for Drax especially to kind of accept that because he'd grown so close to them, and especially Mantis, you know, the one who, even though she was only in the second two movies, where they just kind of developed this connection and they were always talking and in that same Guardians way, they were always just bantering, being like, no, you're disgusting. Like, I hate you. Just to see how close their connection really was when we got to the end of all of this, when they had to separate.
And watching her stand up for him too about 3/4 of the way through the movie, where she's just like, we like him because he's funny. Yeah, he's stupid, but he makes us laugh. He's the only person here that's happy, you know?
And that was a good little, like, not action joke, but like a serious joke moment where we talk about maybe it's not always the best, but that one where they're having that conversation and you're feeling it, but Drax is in the back like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like,
you think I'm stupid?
Oh, wait a sec. I don't know if I love this. While we're on the topic of Drax, just really quick, sorry, I know you wanted to go somewhere else. We got the Drax back that we wanted, right? We talk about dumb, stupid Drax and how it's too much and over the top and how we missed the emotionality that he had in the first one, because as soon as we kill Ronan, whatever, all of a sudden Drax and his family and his daughter, it doesn't matter anymore, and he's just dumb Drax, right? And for part of this movie, I still feel he's kind of like that, but we got a lot, like you said, it wasn't too over the top, and we also get back to Drax the dad, right? And we talk about that, Drax the Destroyer versus, Drax the dad and things like that. It was just really nice to be able to have that moment at the end where he's there with the kids and you see that and you feel the real and the more emotional Drax that we wanted. And I'm really glad that we got that again and it didn't just end on dumb bro Drax.
Yeah. I'm actually like, I want you to know that's where I want to go actually was like the growth of Drax and how he came full circle. My favorite part of this movie is the discussion between Mantis and defending him, but then also when he's playing with the children at the end. And like, I have never like related to like a comment more when it was like, you're not a lot of things. You're never really meant to be this. You're never really meant to be this, but like this suits you. And I was kind of like, I love that because I'm like a wandering person too. Like I just kind of float and I like get really interested in things. I'm like, nope. And this happens. Right. And I'm like, what the heck do I do? And so like, I kind of relate to that on like a really weird level. I was like, oh yeah, like I don't know that I'm the perfect dad yet. I'm figuring this all out, but I'm like, oh man, it's cool to be a dad and I get to have lots of fun. I get to be silly and weird and I don't even care. And that was Drax right there. And so for me, it was like, I cried during that part actually in the movie. Like I cried like 7 times in this movie because it was so good.
We talked about a lot of characters and obviously there's still more that we want to talk about. One of the characters we haven't really mentioned yet is Groot. And Groot, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say takes a backseat in the film, but he sort of does.
Kind of.
But he pitches into all the character storylines, and he's obviously doing all of this for Rocket as well. It's a really big part of
that
his
one
life.
Scene with him, like by Rocket, like by his bedside, I was like, oh man, that's like tugging my heart.
That's his so dad.
Mm-hmm. It was definitely tough. I read an article that Cade sent me, and I wanted to know if I was the only stupid one who didn't understand Groot's different line at the end of the movie. Did you guys catch the meaning of it the first time you watched it? Was I the only dumb one who didn't understand it?
It threw me off when I first heard it. I didn't really think about it again much until you sent me that article. I kind of forgot about that moment because there's just so much to take in. But he sent me a headline that's like, said like, oh, we spent so much time with Groot that. Right? Isn't that what it was? We spent so much time with Groot that finally we get to
It's like it's an audience payoff moment, right? And at first I didn't understand it. It was just like, oh, like he said something different because it's the end and he's going to say something different or whatever. So through Gamora's storyline, it gives us as the audience, the storyline that we've been, going along in this journey with him. Where at first she's just going throughout the whole movie, just like, he's just saying, I'm Groot, I know who you are, all of these things, blah, 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 blah. And then as you get to the end, he says it again, and you realize that she understands because she spent that time with him. And then we've been with him this whole time. He says, I am Groot, I am Groot. He says, we are Groot the one time in the first one. But he says, I am Groot all the time. And then when he says, I love you guys, everyone's like, whoa, he said something different. And I was like, oh, he said something different. And then, it wasn't until I saw the article that I realized, and James Gunn confirms, right, that it's not just happenstance. That was definitely the real meaning behind it, was to say, you've been on this journey with the Guardians, you've been with them for so long, like, now you understand Groot and everything. You could speak Groot now, so just a cool little...
That called me back, so I did not know this as well. I was kind of like, whoa, because I read just a blip on Instagram about it, but it called me back to like, which is the one where... Thor is in with the Guardians, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I took this in school, like type thing. Like they teach this as I took it as an elective." And I was like, "Holy crap!" So there actually is like something like they're not like I think at one point Gamora's like, "You guys aren't just making stuff up, right? Are you?" Like
I wonder if Thor really does understand.
That's a good question. Or if he just said that.
Just, that would be really funny if he just pretended.
Yeah, I can see Thor just being like, "Oh, I want to impress these guys," so it's just like, "Oh yeah, I took that in school."
Yeah, and that's a possibility, but I was like called back to it that like, okay, there is more to this understanding because. For a long time, I just thought they were like, oh, just making assumptions about what he was meaning. Because I was like, he's a freaking tree, But my favorite part about Groot in this, when you talk about him taking a back seat, and we'll get into the High Evolutionary here in a minute. We definitely have to talk about High Evolutionary and kind of his cronies and what he's doing. But when they go to the High Evolutionary and Groot whips out all the guns out of his body because like somehow they're untraceable. I don't know, like whatever happened. But
I don't think they even scanned him. I think they just saw a naked body and was just like, oh, I don't see any guns on him.
Possibly. I have no idea. But like what was really cool was that like you see Peter Quill beforehand, like Star-Lord go, and he's like, you know what to do with these. Like he just like, so he absorbs them or whatever he does, tucks them away. And then he whips out like 10 arms of guns and you're like, woo, let's go. Like that's how I felt at least. So it was really cool. You're right.
It's funny the evolution of Groot being this like old, wise tree from the first one to being raised by these bunch of a-holes to be this violent, just like deadly tree who just kills people in the craziest ways.
Welcome to the Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's what happens when you get raised by a family of pirates.
Which movie is it where he's like, welcome to the freaking Guardians of the Galaxy? And he didn't say frickin' like that. Yeah.
But I guess he did in the first one. He did kill some people in pretty violent ways in that hallway where he like shoots the branch through him and then it just turns and smiles like, yeah, I did good.
Yeah, I did it. Groot really stood out, I think. We talked about him taking a little bit of a backseat. He really stood out in the action sequences. That one, like you mentioned, was definitely a really big one. And then my, I think, personal favorite is the No Sleep Till Brooklyn scene in that hallway where you just have the very cool camera movement, the slow-mo, Groot's going all through, and it just kind of pans one by one as they're doing all of the things.
Shoots as if it's a one-shot.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Definitely. I think, because I'm trying to remember, there were two kind of that I wanted to highlight. I'm struggling to remember what the second one was, but that one I think I would call my favorite action scene from the movie. And it was nice because it's very cool. James Gunn has talked about, he's talked about superhero fatigue, and he says superhero fatigue is like kind of a thing, but it's not really. It's more so people just hate going to watch people bash each other with no real story attached to it, right? And so this was keeping the superhero theme of we get the cool stuff that we still want to see, but it was so much more limited because the story was so much more grounded in Rocket's story and the group and where they're all going to end up. But we still love the action sequences, and that was my favorite action sequence of the movie.
That's probably one of my favorite, like in general, in Marvel. Because I remember watching it, and I'm just thinking, okay, is it going to end here? No, this keeps going and building and crescendoing. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is becoming like super awesome. And to go back off of that stuff about the like how like you get emotionally invested in that action scene too, because they're fighting basically these really weird like animal robot things that are like, in another, I think we even talked about this last podcast, but like another like superhero movie, it could just be like generic like robots or something like in Ant-Man. Like there's like those things that King has, like the no-name soldiers and stuff. You don't really know what's going on with them. But with these, like, like, okay, these are like high evolutionaries, like, there's like a pig.
The war pig.
War pig
like
and like all these
experiments.
Yeah, all these failed experiments they're fighting. So it's like, it still keeps you like in that story. So, it's not just like some random like action scene for action scene's sake. Like it still kind of plays into that story with the high evolutionary and like his whole, which is funny because it's like what, like his whole army is just these things he kind of pushed aside, doesn't really care about, other than they're supposed to protect this colony of like super like perfect children or like humans or something like that. Like,
yeah. Those crazy mutations.
Well, they reminded me of the mutts from we talked about it earlier, Hunger Games. They remind me of kind of like these monstrosities that have just been twisted and done, and I really like that. And I want to talk about the thing you were talking about where like the fatigue and superior fatigue. What I liked about this actually was that there felt like actual risk in this movie. Like Rocket could die, and then in the end, like all these animals could die, like Star-Lord could die. Like there was a number of things that like were actual real risk. And to be honest with you, I was not expecting the ending of this movie to turn out the way it was. I was expecting it to actually be darker because I was like, James Gunn is going to leave with a bang and he's going to throw us for a loop. And he did. And I love what he did with it, but I was like expecting a much darker outcome, but I loved it.
One of my biggest nitpicks about number 2 is their power consistencies didn't really flow from the first one to that one. Like in the first one, everybody felt a little more human, except for Drax was a little OP, right? And then all of a sudden in the second one, Drax is being like pulled behind a spaceship, bounced off of trees, and then gets up as if nothing happened. Like he freaking fell out of the sky behind a spaceship. Like you would at least come with scars. And then Gamora later in the movie picks up a gun the size of a spaceship with ease. And I'm just like, wait a minute, are these guys like
the same people?
Yeah, are they like
they took roids?
Overpowered? What's going on here? And
they're all Super Saiyans is what they are.
And then back to this one, they're back to being a little more balanced out where it's not like they can actually be hurt and there's actually some risk and
it made that one scene so emotional where Rocket was on the brink and you didn't know it was going to happen and he went into the light and he talked to Lila and the friends were there, right? Because at that moment, I didn't know. It felt a little weird, and so I was like, I don't think he's gonna die right now because it would make this movie not feel cheap, but like this. Because I was expecting someone to die, and obviously a lot of the marketing kind of geared it towards Rocket and kind of making you think that could be a possibility. But they went on this whole mission throughout the movie, so I was like, oh, they're not gonna kill Rocket or anything like that. But in that moment, I didn't know, and it was so emotional because their story had already been told. You'd already seen how they died and everything, and we already talked a lot about how that story was emotional and the great beyond and everything, and it was really fulfilling to see Rocket's character both in the end of this movie and then moving forward as he takes on the role of the leader of the Guardians moving forward. To take that line from Lila to heart, you still have a purpose, like, and you'll join us one day, but for now you still have a purpose to keep on going. So, sorry, there's too many good things in this movie
and then I was gonna say on like with the emotional part of it, Chris Pratt's performance of Rocket almost dying, like that's one of the moments that got me teared up. Was just like, dude, he cares about this guy, and he is like freaking out when Rocket's about to die. Like he is just like, you can see the pain on his face. Like I'm got to save my friend,
Yeah. Well, and that was the moment that they clipped that into the trailer pretty briefly, and that was kind of the moment that had people thinking, oh, this is going to be another level of emotional for the Guardians, just seeing Chris Pratt with that on his face and like almost like drool and spit like coming from his mouth just because it's yelling. Just really, really incredible job done by everyone. And I mean, we talk about Rocket and we keep saying Rocket, and we mentioned so many of these actors and what they do and whatnot. Bradley Cooper and his voiceover work for Rocket is just absolutely incredible. Really, really good. And then Sean Gunn, they had him do the voice for young Rocket as well.
Oh, cool. That wasn't.
What's his character called in
Kraglin.
Kraglin. Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about his character.
The good dog.
Yeah, the good dog part, but also like the part like he's struggling at the first to master the telekinesis to do all this type of stuff, and it's really cool to like have the flashback to where you realize that Yondu also was in way like a huge impactful part of his life.
Hey, shush.
Mac feels things about this.
Mac,
as
you're
well.
a good dog.
Mac knows
Mac,
he's a good
you're
dog.
a good dog. But like the beauty in this was like there was a good diversity of the feels in this movie, like where you experience everything. I want to change veins really quickly, if that's okay, to the High Evolutionary and kind of like how whack that whole system society with him is. So he's this man, and we're introduced to him through Baby Rocket and all this. I guess at the first. With Adam Warlock and the High Priestess or whatever high person,
Sovereign Queen,
golden face lady,
Elizabeth the Beggy.
Thank you. But like how he kind of evolves and you kind of see more, and then like we get to him and he's like more machine than person or living tissue type thing at one point, and it's like such a fascinating dark character that there's like a mad scientist out there like picking up animals from Earth and creating counter Earth and making a sea lion with like little tinfoil arms. I didn't know about that.
This kind of when we talked about Ronan in the last one, where I think I said it on the pod, I can't remember, but when I said it's just kind of nice to have a villain be a villain, this is it done really well.
Yeah. Like
this is a villain that we don't have to sympathize with, that we all want to be punished. We don't have to be like, well, he's kind of got a point, we are overcrowded. I guess like Thanos has a point. This guy is straight up evil, but he's got depth to him. You watch him and you're just like, this guy got a god complex. He's got an ego. I hate this guy.
Talking about villains. You said ego, sorry.
Well, what's kind of interesting is the actor who plays this is not a frequenter in movies and in
so
TV
good,
series. He's a stage performer primarily. And
cool.
so like when he was approached to do this, like what an amazing and like way to solidify yourself as like, I might not be in a lot of films, but damn, I'm good. Like that was like it. Like I hated this character at times. Like you're right. He was a bad guy. He was brutal. He was dark. He was, right? He just was like combining it. And I loved when like Baby Rocket is chilling there and he's like, oh, this is how you fix this. This is what's wrong. And he like, you see the actual madness and like, I need that brain. Like, I need this. Like, it's not like, oh, like blah, blah, blah. How'd you, like he asked, how did you figure this out? But like, you see the wheels of like, there's nothing good that's coming from Rocket knowing this stuff. Like, that's what's crazy.
And I love that just broke him, that one of his creations could be smarter than him was just not okay. He keeps talking about like creating the perfect being and creating the perfect world, but as soon as he like makes someone that is actually better than him, he's just like, well, no, this can't be okay. I have to understand that, and I have to take it, and I have to put it in me because I have to be the perfect being. And I kind of feel like everything that he does is very selfish, he's doing it really for himself,
And how cool is that scene like at the end too, where like his kind of minions towards the end, he's still so obsessed with like trying to get Rocket and to like get him to get his brain and stuff, and then even like his like like his second in command, all that stuff's like, you're like gonna lead us all to death. Like we pretty much all mutinied on you just because of how obsessed you are. Like I feel like that's kind of like hammers it home. Like
even the closest people to him ended up seeing the madness and
turning on him,
needing a difference.
But how great was that scene of Quill just being like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear another madman's monologue. Like, I'm done with this.
Very good.
The whole thing was just, I would say like for me, like this has been my favorite bad guy. Like I loved Thanos, like you said. But I could sympathize. I'm like, you're right. There's a lot of problems. Let's like fix it. But like this guy, I was like, I don't want to hang out with you. I don't want to hear like same thing. I don't want to hear it. But I loved how that mutiny happens. Like you brought it up. The mutiny was probably one of my favorite parts of his part of the storyline, because right, they're taking off in this ship, it's blowing up because it's getting just devastated and stuff is happening, and Nowhere shows up and launches the one big bomb at him and all this type of thing, and that was cool when the mutiny happens, but like so sad to see like that person who's like the control operator of everything, like hooked up to all the wires and cables, like that was weird.
I was gonna say, I remembered my other favorite action sequence was the scene where all of the Guardians end up fighting the High Evolutionary right there at the end. Another one with a lot of very cool camera moves, and everyone kind of has like kind of sounds like rude or anything, but the guy was terrible, so go with it. Had their moment to kind of deal with him, and so it showed each one of them. Each one of them had a very cool move, and the camera moves with it were very, very cool, with them ending up just taking him down and being done with him, and it ending up with the horrific but crazy
Which,
part
speaking
of
of
his face getting
speaking
pulled
of a
off.
part, that was the part I looked at Vince and I was like, this kid probably should see a guy's face come off. And they literally show his face with the eyeball and like all that stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness.
They didn't pull any punches on that. That's exactly when I was referencing later. I was just like, that kid shouldn't be seeing that.
Well, because it's so interesting to see that, because I don't remember, it wasn't much earlier because it showed us. Obviously, in the actual timeline, it's earlier, but with Rocket, when he gets his chance, when they're escaping and everything, and Lila and Thor and them die, and he gets a chance, and he has that catharsis, that cathartic moment.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it was just so horrifying to watch. Like, you understood where it was coming from, but it made you feel so bad for Rocket, because all of that pent-up rage and about someone that he had even looked up to at one point, right, being so important to his life, and then learning that they weren't going to, that nothing was possibly going to become of his life, and the immediate moment after this man is killed, the only people that he's really known as friends and good people in his life, and just it was just such a we've talked about so many heartbreaking moments with Rocket throughout this movie, but it was another one that came through just so strongly and emotionally that it reminded me of The Last of Us episode 8 with Ellie. We won't spoil that since it's different, but with Ellie and David, where it's happening and you feel so bad for the character in that moment, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much, and then you're like, but with what they've had to go through and everything, and it's just crazy. So just another incredible and amazing moment that really showed Rocket's backstory and showed the High Evolutionary and his true God complex and insane power that he thought he had.
When you have a God complex and insane power, your assumptions are high, and in the end you end up making a fool of yourself, I think is a common thread in a lot of villain series. Any last thoughts or questions before we kind of close things up and do the final thoughts?
I couldn't have laughed harder at the way they used the F-bomb in this movie.
Yes, we have to talk about that.
Sorry. Apparently that was ad-libbed, like it was Chris Pratt just came up. It came out, whatever. But holy crap, I laughed so hard at that. Just his sheer frustration of her trying to get in this car, and then just at the very end, just being like, just get in the freaking car. It just worked so well for me.
Just talking about it makes me like this film even more. Like, just even having talked about some of the more emotional moments got me a little emotional during the show, which is a good sign for a movie. And just, I don't know, just like thinking about how it feels like a really good closure to, like, I feel like pretty much every Guardian was able to have like an arc that you could see kind of ends with Volume 3, because like really Rocket ends up becoming like the leader now. And so, are we going to maybe hopefully see more of him and Cosmo and Adam Warlock and that one little girl, I can't remember her name, but
I think her name's Quasar in the comics.
Yeah, so apparently she's actually like in the original Guardians of the Galaxy or something, and they just never put her in, so it's kind of nice little
nod to that.
Little nod to that. But just like seeing like how, like kind of how that goes forward, but at the same time, like you're, like if this ended up being like the last Guardians movie, like I feel like I would look forward to just watching all three of these movies like back to back to back as like their own separate trilogy versus like the whole Marvel, cinematic universe.
I definitely had some pretty mixed expectations coming into this movie with where the MCU had been going and just kind of hearing different things and hoping that this would be a satisfying conclusion. And even though there were things that I did nitpick on this movie, it really was just, like my Letterboxd review said, just a satisfying conclusion for this trilogy for all of these characters. And I love that so many of them weren't what we expected to go through, right? I expected Quill and Gamora to get together. I expected Rocket or someone to die. And all of these things subverted my expectations, and I loved it. The way that they ended up taking this story made me emotional. It made me happy. And just to wrap all of that up, and there was more after this scene, but with that final scene with the Dog Days Are Over playing and them dancing and being happy, that moment itself kind of wrapped the trilogy and the story of these characters all together. It was a beautiful moment to watch. That was a moment where I was getting teary-eyed. It was a happy moment, right? But it was one where you're just sitting there, and as the song plays and you see them. And I've seen a lot of people talk about Drax dancing in that scene, right? Because he has his whole thing where, happy people dance and I don't dance or whatever. And to show him dancing and stuff, it was cool. But I think Nebula dancing in that scene and being happy. And there's that, that still I've kind of seen all over Twitter and everything of just her pure happiness and thinking of her arc. And I talked about you see Gamora with the Ravagers in that scene. The whole trilogy ends up, this third movie wraps it all up very beautifully. And that one scene is kind of a mini wrap on the movie and the trilogy as well in just a beautiful way. And I think James Gunn did an incredible job. And I'm really, really looking forward to see what he can do in the DC universe.
I totally agree. Like I'm glad you brought up that final scene. I don't want to say too much more about it, but that scene was almost just kind of like a breath of fresh air of joy for me. Like I cried during it, and I love the beauty of like a happy closure. Like I'm a sappy person. I'm sensitive. I'm soft. I enjoy those type of things. As much as I love a good action sequence, I love a heavy bit of heart. And the way that the film ended for me and everything kind of closed out, I was like, this is good. Like I'm happy. I definitely would watch it again multiple times. Like it's going to be on that watch list of like pinging through it once a year, once it comes out, once I own it. So
I'm excited that Star-Lord will return because you can bring Rocket back and Groot back really easy. And I think that my favorite part of the Guardians are Rocket and Quill. So when that popped up, that was the best part of the end credits scene for me, was like that guarantee that we're going to see more Chris Pratt. I'm a big Chris Pratt fan, so I'm really excited to see more of him in the universe. I don't know where he's going to show up, but I'm excited for it. I love this movie. It was great.
That's about it, I think.
That's the end? Is that the end of this podcast? Thank you for tuning into the Pause, Ride, and Play podcast. Tyler, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again.
We'll have you back again if you want to join us, and we'll catch you next time. Again, right here. Please go ahead, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Instagram. We do have TikTok now, which I've been quite terrible at continuing to post, but we're there as well. But if you can give us a thumbs up and a subscribe, we'd appreciate you anywhere you can. Have a good one.